Welcome to this explainer. Today we're looking at the rise and fall of Sultan Bayezid I. Imagine having just absolute, unimaginable power, right? Dizzying ambition, only to experience a downfall so sudden it literally defies belief. His reign was short, just 13 years, from 1389 to 1402. But man, in those 13 tight years, Bayezid completely reshaped the map. He struck fear into the hearts of his enemies and, well, eventually flew a little too close to the sun. If you love history packed with high stakes and stunning reversals of fortune, you are absolutely in the right place.
Okay, let's dive into this because I want to start by framing our entire explainer around one incredible, kind of paradoxical question. How does a sultan with the world's largest army die in captivity? Just sit with that for a second. We're not talking about a minor ruler of some small forgotten province here. No, we're talking about a man who commanded military forces on a scale the known world had barely ever seen. He had the whole shebang, absolute authority, boundless resources, an army that could crush almost anything in its path. And yet, his story doesn't end on a throne surrounded by wealth. It ends in a cage, in captivity. That staggering contrast, going from the absolute pinnacle of global power to a total loss of freedom, that is the central tragic irony of Bayezid's life. And today, we're going to use historical evidence to figure out exactly how that happened.
To really understand this history, we have to look through a physical doorway to the past. Specifically, a surviving silver coin issued directly under Bayezid's reign. This isn't just a piece of metal, it's a tangible piece of his authority. Think about it. This coin circulated through the hands of merchants, soldiers, and everyday people during his rule. The obverse, or the front of the coin, depicts his name, Bayezid bin Murad, and the reverse is inscribed with the phrase Kalata Mokahu 792. This right here is the physical evidence of an empire. When you study history, it's so easy to get lost in the grand sweeping narratives, right? The massive numbers. But looking at this small piece of silver reminds us this was a real functioning society. This coin was literally meant to outlast him, to project his power far and wide, and cement his legacy right in the pockets of his subjects. So the crucial point is how he actually built up the power backing that silver coin. He was working with an incredible foundation as the son of Murad I and Guyasike Khatun, basically inheriting a state that was already on the move. But Bayezid didn't just maintain the status quo. No, he put his foot firmly on the accelerator. He built one of the largest armies in the known world at the time. Just try to visualize the logistics for a second. The resources, the sheer force of will required to assemble and feed a military machine of that staggering scale. He was forging an absolute juggernaut. And what do you do when you have the largest army in the world? Well, you go after the biggest prize. That incredible ambition drove him to literally lay siege to Constantinople. Now actually, he was ultimately unsuccessful in taking the great city, but the very act of besieging Constantinople, that shows you the terrifying scale of his reach. He was not afraid to strike at the very heart of legendary empires. Now what's really interesting about this is how Bayezid actively chose to view himself. He adopted a very specific, incredibly weighty title, Sultan Rum. Rum was an old Islamic name for the Roman Empire. So by taking on the title Sultan Rum, Bayezid was fiercely broadcasting his ultimate authority. He wasn't just calling himself, a local king or a regional leader. He was explicitly connecting himself to the legacy, the prestige, and the vast geographical claim of the Roman Empire itself. It perfectly captures his towering ambition and supreme confidence. When a leader starts adopting titles that basically say, "I am the heir to Rome," you know they are planning to conquer everything the light touches. It's a profound psychological move to project absolute, unquestionable dominance over the known world. Let's move to 1389 and see how this builds into an unstoppable wave of expansion. His aggressive path of conquest was specifically aimed at building a really robust Islamic and Turkish base for his domain. So, starting in 1389, when he became the Ottoman Sultan, he just aggressively pushed forward. By 1396, he achieved a monumental victory, decisively defeating the Crusaders at Nicopolis in modern-day Bulgaria. And this wasn't just some minor skirmish. Defeating a united Crusader army sent shockwaves all the way through Europe. Then, the very next year, in 1397, he turns his attention homeward and defeats the Karaman Emirate at Akçay. He's actively widening Ottoman suzerainty over the Turkish Muslim rulers in Anatolia, annexing various Turkmen emirates one by one to really consolidate that massive power base. But then, we hit 1402, a catastrophic defeat at the Battle of Ankara. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what that brick wall was. We are looking at the ultimate historical matchup. On one hand, we have our Sultan, Bayezid I, busy annexing Turkmen emirates, rapidly widening Ottoman suzerainty, and expanding his borders eastward through Anatolia. But there's a massive
massive problem. By pushing so aggressively to the east, his borders start bumping up against the territory of another unstoppable force, Timur-Tamerlane, the fearsome Central Asian conqueror. Timur was a military genius with his own massive army and his own insatiable drive for conquest. Bayezid's relentless regional conquests acted like a magnet, drawing the direct attention of this rival superpower. It was a classic case of an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. The world simply wasn't big enough for both Bayezid and Timur to expand into the same space simultaneously. A clash was totally, terrifyingly inevitable.
Which brings us to the devastating climax. July 1402. The confrontation happens at Kubakavasi, near Ankara. This is the moment where the commander of the world's largest army faces his ultimate test, and he loses. In a catastrophic turn of events, Bayezid is completely defeated by Timur. But it doesn't end on the battlefield. Bayezid is captured. The man who called himself the Sultan of Rome, the man who decisively crushed the Crusaders, is taken prisoner, and tragically, he dies in captivity. It is a profoundly somber, staggering resolution to his reign. Literally, in the blink of an eye, the absolute height of power dissolves into total subjugation. It shows us just how fragile even the most formidable empires can be when they overextend and encounter an equal opposing force.
All of this leaves us with a profound question to really think about. How is a legacy of immense power and devastating defeat ultimately remembered through a small piece of silver? We started this explainer by looking at a coin, a tiny physical artifact stamped with the name of a man who once shook the very foundations of Europe and Asia. Bayezid built one of the most terrifying armies in history, adopted the most grandiose titles imaginable, and suffered one of the most humbling defeats a ruler could ever face. Yet, today, the grand armies are gone, the battlefields are quiet, but that silver coin remains. It brilliantly captures the fleeting nature of absolute power. Monuments crumble, empires fall, and kings die in captivity, but their ambition is forever frozen, reduced to a few grams of metal stamped in time. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Until next time, keep questioning the history that we leave behind.